London's history is etched in fire, plague, and war. But on a quiet autumn afternoon in 1814, the city faced a catastrophe that was, well, stranger, more unsettling. A disaster born not from malice, not from nature, but from progress itself. In a cellar on New Street, the back wall of a small home just dissolved. One moment, Mary Banfield and her 4-year-old daughter Hannah were taking tea. The next, a scalding, dark torrent washed them away into the ruins. They were among the very first to be consumed by the wave. A correspondent for the Morning Post described a scene of almost apocalyptic destruction. But this wasn't the work of fire, it wasn't an earthquake. This devastation was caused by something far more ordinary, and in its own way, far more sinister: beer. Welcome to Insight History HD. Together, we will peel back the layers of narratives long locked away in the archives of history. You see, the Great London Beer Flood is so much more than just a bizarre footnote. It's really a study of the butterfly effect. It's a story that shows how a single neglected mechanical flaw could ripple through time, forcing a question we are still dealing with today. What is the price of progress, and who's made to pay it? To really grasp the consequences, we have to first understand the cause. And the event began not as a tragedy, but as a towering symbol of industrial ambition in Regency London. Over at Meux Co's Horseshoe Brewery, a vat 22 feet high just erupted with explosive force. It unleashed a 15-foot-high wave of hot fermenting porter. We're talking over 320,000 gallons. That's enough to fill half of an Olympic-sized swimming pool, and it all crashed into the streets below. The sequence of failure was just chillingly routine. About an hour before the disaster, a 700-pound iron hoop that was holding this massive wooden vat together snapped. A clerk reported it. The supervisor, he dismissed it. Apparently, these things happened 2 to 3 times a year. It was just noted for repair later. An hour went by, and then the vat completely disintegrated, starting a domino effect that tore right through the brewery wall. And make no mistake, this was no bolt from the blue. According to the socio-legal analysis in The Architecture of Industrial Catastrophe, testimony from that clerk, George Crick, revealed an institutional culture of, and I'm quoting here, passive toleration toward equipment failure. In the drive for profit, these known risks weren't a call for caution, they were just a cost of doing business. A wave of this size is a disaster anywhere, but where this wave struck, in the labyrinth-like slum of St. Giles, it became a massacre. The area was known as the St. Giles Rookery. The term itself was a dismissal, really, comparing the people who lived there to the chaotic, dirty nesting colonies of birds. It was a label that stripped them of their dignity long before the flood ever stripped them of their lives. Drawing on civic records that are detailed in The Architecture of Industrial Catastrophe, you get this portrait of extreme marginalization. St. Giles was just packed with Irish immigrants and the city's poorest laborers. Families were crammed into single rooms, or, most perilously, into subterranean cellars. These damp, unlit basements were the cheapest places to live in London, and they would become instant death traps. And the Horseshoe Brewery itself embodied this brutal contrast. It stood like a titan of industry on Tottenham Court Road, a real beacon of London's wealth. But its back wall abutted the squalor of St. Giles. An engine of immense fortune built literally on the edge of its city's deepest poverty. What followed the flood was not really a rescue, but a reckoning. A collision between industrial power, human tragedy, and a legal system that was designed to protect one of those far more than the other. 8 people died. 14-year-old Eleanor Cooper, a servant girl crushed by a collapsing wall. Mary Mulvaney and her 3-year-old son, Thomas, killed while they were at a wake for another child in a neighboring cellar. And the others, Anne, Elizabeth, Catherine, Sarah, and Hannah, mostly women and children, who were at home while the men were out at work. Now, the financial cost to the brewery was staggering. They lost an estimated £23,000 worth of porter, a fortune back then. But the company had powerful friends. It actually successfully petitioned Parliament and was granted a refund of over £7,000 in taxes paid on the lost beer. It was basically a government bailout that saved the firm from ruin. And for the families who lost their homes, their possessions, their children, there was nothing. Absolutely nothing. At the inquest, the verdict, as recorded by the Morning Post, was swift and, well, stunning.
The jury ruled that the 8 had lost their lives casually, accidentally, and by misfortune. The disaster was officially designated an act of God, a legal shield that completely absolved the brewery of all financial and moral responsibility. The known failure, the ignored warning, none of it mattered in a court of law.
The floodwaters eventually receded, but a foul stench lingered for months. The event's true legacy, though, would take far longer to ferment, slowly transforming industry and our very definition of accountability.
The most immediate impact was technological. You could say the disaster served as a brutal lesson in structural engineering. The age of the colossal wooden vat was over. In the decades that followed, brewers gradually replaced them with more durable, concrete-lined vessels, and eventually, the stainless steel tanks that are standard today.
Today, the Dominion Theater stands where the Horseshoe Brewery once loomed. The physical scar on the landscape has vanished, buried under a new London. But the historical lesson remains. The flood was a symptom of an age that valued industrial expansion above all else, especially above human life. A legal system that shielded capital from the consequences of its own negligence? Well, that wasn't a flaw in the system, it was a feature. But tragedies like this one, however unjust the verdict, planted the seeds of change. They forced a slow, painful reckoning with the idea that the lives of the poor were not just casualties of progress, but a debt that society has to answer for. It really compels us to ask a difficult question. Are the safety regulations, the building codes, the principles of corporate liability that protect us today, are they anything other than the ghosts of past tragedies? Are they really a framework for prevention? Or are they just a memorial, written in the losses of those who came before? If this journey has offered you a new perspective, support our exploration by subscribing to Insight History HD. Thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next narrative.